The podcast you are about to listen to is centered on a book titled Divine Wisdom: Key to Mental and Intellectual Excellence by Pastor Jonah Okwudiri Jacob. Pastor Jonah is both the author and owner of the book titled Divine Wisdom. For inquiries on how to get the hard copy, audio or PDF version of the book, kindly contact Impact Media through the informations at the end of this video. God bless you in Jesus' mighty name.
So jumping right in today, think about this. You can have like 3 advanced degrees, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You could memorize an entire theological library. You could, completely understand human psychology, and you could still essentially live your life as a total fool.
Yeah, which sounds incredibly harsh right up front.
Right. But it's not an insult. It's actually this devastating kind of controversial premise that we're unpacking today in our deep dive.
Because we really do, as a culture, we just sort of worship the accumulation of facts.
We totally do. You look at a resume, you see the titles, you see like decades of experience, and you just assume, oh, I am looking at wisdom.
Yeah, but actually you're looking at a huge crisis of definition.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are going to explore with you today, because we're diving into a really fascinating text by Pastor Jonah Okwudiri Jacob, and it's called The Essence and Application of Divine Wisdom.
And Pastor Jacob, he really just takes a sledgehammer to our cultural assumptions. He argues that all those things we reward, like raw intellect, technical prowess, shrewd business skills, they're basically just counterfeits.
Or like fragments, right? Incomplete fragments of what actual wisdom is.
Right, exactly, fragments.
So the mission for this deep dive, and I want you, the listener, to really hold on to this, is that we are going to completely redefine what it means to be wise. We're going to dismantle these assumptions.
And if we want to, just extract the absolute core message of this whole text right now, it's this. True wisdom is demonstrated through obedient action.
Obedient action.
Not just accumulated knowledge.
Which is huge. We're going to come back to that so many times today. Wisdom is what you do, not just what you know.
But, to even grasp that, Pastor Jacob says we have to clear the board first.
Right. We have to look at what wisdom isn't. So let's strip away those false equivalents we all carry around, starting with this concept of craftiness, or just craft.
Yeah, the text roots this in its original sense. So it's not necessarily about being like a sneaky person. It's about a possessed skill.
Like a trade.
Exactly. An ability you develop through really intense learning or physical training. Yeah. He lists things like carpentry, plumbing, blacksmithing, hunting, fishing.
Very tangible physical abilities. And we deeply respect that, right? If you watch a master carpenter who spent like 30 years perfecting their trade.
Oh, it's incredible to watch.
It really is. They can run their hand over a piece of raw oak and just, know exactly how the grain is going to behave under the chisel. Yeah. They can build a cable without a blueprint.
Right. And we instinctively look at that and say, wow, there is so much wisdom in those hands.
But the author draws a really hard boundary there, doesn't he?
He does. He acknowledges the immense dedication it takes to master a craft, but he categorizes it purely as a developed capability in a very specific domain.
It's a tool.
Yes, it's a tool. And tools, by their very nature, are morally neutral.
Right. A hammer doesn't have a moral compass.
Exactly. A hammer just drives a nail, doesn't care what it's building. And because of that moral neutrality, the text points out that this kind of craftiness can easily kind of spin off into darker territory.
Yeah, he mentions related words like cunning, astuteness, sneakiness, shrewdness, and how they can actually be derogatory.
Let's actually contextualize that, because I think this is where our modern radar gets really jammed.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about a corporate CEO, right? They're navigating this multi-million-dollar merger.
Oh yeah, high stakes.
Right. And this person knows, like, every single legal loophole. They know the exact pressure points to squeeze to just tank the competing company's value.
And they execute this totally cutthroat deal. They maximize their profits, but, it results in thousands of layoffs for the other side.
Right. Now, what does society do? We put that CEO on the cover of a magazine. We call them a visionary.
We literally call it business wisdom.
Yes. But Pastor Jacob's framework says we are completely mislabeling that.
So we're calling it wisdom, but he categorizes it as what? Just a skill.
Just a highly developed skill applied for a selfish end. It's shrewdness. But it falls way short of true wisdom because it's totally isolated from any moral application.
Okay, wait, let me push back on this for a second, just to really unpack it.
Sure, go for it.
Because if someone spends 20 years mastering plumbing or 20 years mastering corporate negotiations, they've done something incredibly hard. They understand their specific reality better than, 99% of people. So why does Pastor Jacob argue that this craft, standing alone, falls short of true wisdom?
It's because mastery of a mechanism is not mastery of a life.
Oh, that's good.
Right. Like the master plumber knows how to sweat a copper pipe perfectly so it never leaks.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful, valuable skill. But that skill offers literally zero guidance on how that plumber should treat their spouse, right? Or how to navigate the grief of losing a parent.
Wow, yeah. It doesn't help with their internal pride or anger.
Exactly. And the corporate leader's shrewdness in the boardroom doesn't translate into a morally sound existence at home. The text argues that true wisdom is comprehensive.
So it has to encompass the whole human experience, not just one isolated proficiency.
Precisely. Craft is just a tool in the toolbox.
It's not the blueprint for the house. Okay, I love that. But if physical skill isn't wisdom, naturally we try to fill that gap with brain power, right? Raw data.
Oh, absolutely. The person with the most facts wins.
Right. Which brings us to the second counterfeit Pastor Jacob tackles, the trap of accumulated knowledge.
And he gives a very clinical definition here. He says knowledge is the mental capacity to grasp and retain certain convictions or truths.
Grasp and retain, that sounds like a hard drive.
It is. It's pure data storage, acquired through learning. But here is the critical observation he makes. He says knowledge is basically a function of the mind and speaks of a potential which may or may not be used.
Armament potential.
Yes. Latent energy. It totally reframes how we look at intellect.
Because we worship words like intelligence, erudition, education.
But the text is saying those are just states of latency, like a battery sitting in a drawer.
Oh, right. It has the capacity to do work, but until you plug it in, it's practically useless.
Exactly. Now think about what this means for, say, our educational or religious systems today.
Okay, yeah. Like an academic who has been in the university system for 40 years, they have a PhD, they wrote the textbooks.
Boundless erudition.
Or in a ministry context, a theologian who spent decades in a seminary. They read Greek and Hebrew, they memorized volumes of church history.
And when they speak, we assume we're receiving wisdom, simply because we are just so overwhelmed by their retention of facts.
But wait, let me pause here. Because we spend our whole lives being told knowledge is power.
Right, it's practically our cultural motto.
People go into massive debt for these degrees. So is Pastor Jacob saying that all this learning, all this education is just totally useless?
No, he's very careful not to say that. He never diminishes the value of knowledge.
Okay, good.
Yeah, his specific phrasing is that wisdom is broader in scope than knowledge. So knowledge is the essential raw material.
You can't have wisdom without it.
Right. The tragedy isn't having the knowledge, the tragedy is stopping there.
So it's necessary, but totally insufficient on its own.
Think of it like a huge pile of bricks sitting in an empty lot.
Okay.
If you have the mental capacity to grasp and retain facts, you've gathered the building blocks. But a pile of bricks is not a house.
It's just a tripping hazard right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we live in a society that hands out awards to the person who hoards the biggest pile of bricks, regardless of whether they ever build anything.
That hoarding behavior is so fascinating psychologically. Like, we get a dopamine hit every time we read a self-help book.
Or listen to a dense lecture.
Yes. We feel like we accomplished something just because we acquired a new fact. We mistake the feeling of learning for the act of growing.
And the text insists that until those retained facts are taken off the shelf and put to work, they are nothing more than dormant potential.
Which naturally leads us to ask, well, what happens when we start organizing those facts? When we start connecting the dots?
Right, which introduces the third concept the author explores: understanding.
If knowledge is retaining the facts, understanding is making sense of them.
Yeah. He defines understanding as the ability to develop insight on an issue based on personal convictions, possessing good judgment.
And he uses this really beautiful phrase, doesn't he?
He does. Grasping the spirit of the words or issues.
Grasping the spirit of the words, that requires stepping way beyond a dictionary definition. You have to sense the deeper resonance.
It's a huge cognitive leap. He says it involves the power of apprehension and developed abstract thought. We're moving from simple memory to comprehension, discernment, awareness.
Okay, so if knowledge is knowing that a tomato is biologically a fruit,
Right.
Understanding is possessing the insight to know you shouldn't put it in a fruit salad.
The classic culinary joke, but it perfectly maps the transition, doesn't it?
It really does. It requires pattern recognition.
Let's apply this to a really relatable modern scenario. Something from family life.
Okay, let's do a parenting example. Say you have a parent dealing with a really difficult toddler.
A very high-stress situation.
Right. And this parent wants to be great, so they acquire massive amounts of knowledge. They read the psychology books, they memorize the developmental milestones.
They know exactly how many hours of sleep a 2-year-old needs. They have the bricks.
Right, they have the retained facts. But then they're in a crowded grocery store, and the toddler throws a massive screaming tantrum because the parent, I don't know, peeled their banana the wrong way.
Oh, classic toddler logic.
Exactly. Now, a parent armed only with knowledge might just mentally freeze. They're rapidly flipping through a mental encyclopedia of facts that aren't solving the immediate crisis.
But a parent who possesses understanding, as Pastor Jacob defines it, has developed abstract thought. They have discernment.
Right. They can look at the screaming child, synthesize the environment, and realize, wait, my child isn't actually furious about the banana.
The fluorescent lights are overstimulating them. We skip nap time. This is nervous system exhaustion, not defiance.
Yes. That parent just demonstrated right perception of the true meaning of the issue. They didn't just observe behavior, they apprehended the spirit of the moment. Deep, empathetic insight.
But here is the major friction point in the text.
Okay, lay it on me.
Our hypothetical parent has the raw facts. They have deep psychological insight. They have awareness. Has this parent finally achieved wisdom?
I mean, surely Pastor Jacob would say this is wisdom, right?
He drops the absolute hammer on our intellectual ego right here. The answer is no.
Wait, really? Even with all that profound empathy and insight?
Even with perfectly synthesized insight. Listen to the boundary he draws. He writes, all these exist as potentials in the mental realm in the form of thought within the mind.
Potentials in the mental realm. Wow, that is a devastating critique of the modern intellectual.
It completely dismantles the idea that enlightenment happens purely between your ears.
So you can hold all the facts, comprehend the deepest meaning, but as long as it's just bouncing around inside your skull.
It is not wisdom. Understanding alone cannot describe wisdom because it's trapped in the human soul.
So going back to our parent in the grocery store, they can completely understand the toddler's overstimulation.
Yes, total psychological clarity.
But if that parent just stands there in the aisle, nodding thoughtfully at their own brilliant insight while the kid keeps screaming, and does absolutely nothing to comfort them or leave the store,
their profound understanding is entirely useless in the physical reality.
The bridge was perfectly engineered, but nobody walked across it.
Exactly. And this forces a massive pivot, because if physical skill isn't wisdom, and hoarded facts aren't wisdom, and even deep empathetic understanding isn't wisdom, what is the missing ingredient?
This is it. This is where Pastor Jacob reveals the central truth, the absolute core of his definition.
He clarifies that craft, knowledge, understanding, these are at best attributes of wisdom, prerequisite.
Right. And the turning point is practical application. He says wisdom is the possession of attributes like knowledge and understanding, plus the power to apply them practically for benefit.
The power of practical application for benefit. That is the mechanism. He writes, for until the life of a man is affected positively by the knowledge he has, that man cannot be called a wise man.
Which brings us right back to our anchor for this deep dive. Wisdom is demonstrated through obedient action, not merely accumulated knowledge.
If your physical reality hasn't changed, your behavior hasn't shifted, you aren't wise. You're just heavily educated.
And to cement this, the author introduces this striking analogy. He says trying to build a man by knowledge alone is like trying to bake bread with flour alone.
Oh, I love this analogy. We really need to pull this apart.
Let's do it. So flour represents knowledge. It is the foundational element. You cannot bake bread without it.
Just like you can't have wisdom without foundational facts.
Right. But imagine you are starving. You walk into your kitchen, pour a giant mound of dry, powdery flour into a bowl, and just sit down with a spoon to eat it.
Ugh, it would be suffocating. You'd choke.
It's totally absurd. It has no nutritional value in that state. Your body can't digest raw flour.
And yet, according to the text, this is the exact psychological equivalent of hoarding degrees or memorizing self-help books without changing our daily behavior.
We are choking down dry flour and wondering why our souls are still starving.
It's a profound visualization of like intellectual gluttony. To actually make bread, you have to subject that flour to a process.
You need water, yeast. You have to physically knead the dough, which is hard work, friction.
And finally, you have to subject it to the transformative, uncomfortable heat of an oven. You need action.
And the text gives us a very specific psychological description of what that action looks like internally. He says we shouldn't just stare at the flour.
Right. He writes, we should let it jolt us out of old crystallized habits and discover the courage to face ourselves in actuality.
The courage to face ourselves in actuality. I mean, if we look at human behavior, this is the most daunting proposition in the book.
Oh, without a doubt. Why is it easier to hoard knowledge? Because it's safe.
Yeah. Reading a book about healing a fractured marriage is safe. It happens in the quiet comfort of your own mind. You feel like you're making progress without being vulnerable.
But acting on that knowledge, that requires stepping in front of the mirror of actuality.
You have to look at your old crystallized habits. I am so fascinated by that word, crystallized.
Yeah, what does that word evoke for you?
It implies something that used to be fluid, but over time it hardened into this rigid, fragile structure. Our biases, our laziness, our deep pride, they crystallize over decades.
And the text is saying that when we finally decide to apply pure knowledge, that action acts as a jolt to shatter that rigidity.
And shattering your own ego, that takes immense courage. It is agonizing to face yourself and admit, I have all the theoretical knowledge of how to be kind and patient, but my daily actions prove I am currently cruel and impatient.
Facing that dissonance takes profound bravery. That courage is the heat of the oven that finally bakes the flour into bread. True wisdom demands the force of will to change our crystallized habits.
So this totally shifts wisdom away from being just intellectual. It places it firmly in the realm of moral and behavioral transformation.
But Pastor Jacob isn't just throwing out philosophical theories here. He grounds this entire framework in ancient scripture.
Right. Let's look at the exact biblical passages he uses to prove that action is the ultimate metric.
The first one is from the teachings of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7.
He quotes verses 24 and 26. I'll read it just as it is in the text. Jesus says, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man."
We really need to do a deep exegesis of this, specifically through Pastor Jacob's psychological lens. Notice the two active verbs, hearing and doing.
Okay, let's map those onto our concepts. Hearing the sayings. If someone is sitting there listening, retaining the theological facts, maybe even grasping the spirit of the message.
That maps perfectly onto knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. The hearing is acquiring the raw data and internally comprehending it. And the brilliant, subtle detail here is that both men, the wise one who builds on rock and the foolish one who builds on sand, they both heard the exact same sayings.
The foolish man wasn't foolish because he was uneducated.
He didn't lack knowledge. He didn't skip the sermon that day.
He had the exact same raw material. He possessed the same flour. The only metric Jesus uses to assign the title of wise man is the doing, the obedient action.
The foolish man absorbed life-altering truths. He held them in his mind, but he paralyzed himself. He didn't translate the thought into physical reality.
It's like he held the flawless blueprint for a sturdy house, completely understood the architecture, and then just stood on the beach holding the paper while the hurricane hit.
Wow. Which perfectly validates the author's point. He writes, "The knowledge you possess is not what makes you a man or a woman of wisdom, for there must be an outward transformation based on the knowledge before you can be said to be wise."
And that necessity of outward transformation leads to his second biblical reference. It's a short fragment from 3 John verse 2.
It says, "Even as thy soul prospereth."
Right, and the broader context there is a prayer from the Apostle John for a friend to prosper outwardly and be in good health, in exact proportion to how their soul prospers inwardly.
So Pastor Jacob uses this to explain the tangible result of applied knowledge.
Exactly. He summarizes it beautifully. He writes, "Until the truth you know is both internalized, personalized, and acted upon, it does not bring you an outward profit or gain."
Internalized, personalized, and acted upon. That's a very deliberate sequence.
Internalizing is knowledge. Personalizing is understanding, making it your own conviction. And acting upon it is the manifestation of wisdom.
And only when all three are complete do you get that outward profit, that tangible change in physical reality.
Let's look at a modern ministry illustration to really ground this.
Sure. Imagine a Sunday morning church service. The minister delivers this incredibly moving, theologically airtight sermon on the absolute necessity of forgiveness.
The congregation is fully engaged. taking notes.
Some of them are weeping because they deeply, profoundly understand the psychological rot of bitterness. They grasp the spiritual freedom of forgiveness.
In that isolated moment, they have acquired immense knowledge and they are experiencing deep understanding.
If they close their notebooks, drive home, and continue to harbor toxic resentment against an estranged sibling for the next decade.
Pastor Jacob's framework would argue that absolutely zero wisdom was attained that morning.
None. The biblical wisdom only enters the physical universe if that listener summons the courage to pick up the phone on Monday morning, dial that sibling's number, and physically speak the words, "I forgive you."
That phone call is the obedient action. That phone call is the heat of the oven.
Without it, the sermon was just a temporary emotional high manufactured by unapplied knowledge. It was eating raw flour.
It is incredibly sobering when you look back at your own life and realize how many years you've spent comfortably living in the hearing phase, falsely believing you were in the doing phase.
Action really is the ultimate filter, but, as we establish that action is the mechanism of wisdom, we run into a very dangerous philosophical loophole.
Oh, the fraudster loophole.
Yes. If wisdom is strictly defined as the power of practical application for benefit, what happens when someone uses their applied knowledge maliciously?
Does taking action automatically make them wise?
Right, because I keep thinking about our cutthroat corporate CEO from earlier. That executive applied their knowledge of the legal system, they took ruthless action, they got a massive financial benefit. Does that fulfill the definition?
It's the exact vulnerability in the definition, and the author actually anticipates this immediately.
Oh, he does.
Yes. He addresses it by drawing a really sharp distinction between worldly application and the purity required for divine wisdom. He writes, "Since power of practical application for benefit connotes wisdom, then the knowledge must be pure and clean if divine wisdom is what is intended."
If divine wisdom is what is intended, that modifier changes everything. It implies there are lesser, corrupted forms of wisdom.
Exactly. The text admits that knowledge and understanding are not inherently clean. And he uses a stark example to prove it. He points to what he calls fraudstars.
Fraudstars, like fraudsters, con artists, scammers.
Right. He writes, "For there are many fraudstars who used acquired knowledge and skills to dispossess others of their valuables."
Think about the anatomy of a successful scammer. They have immense knowledge. They understand banking vulnerabilities. They master digital manipulation.
They possess deep understanding too. They can read their targets, exploit their insecurities.
And crucially, they don't leave that understanding dormant. They act. They apply their knowledge practically and reap a tangible benefit stolen assets.
So mechanically, they followed the three-step formula. They internalized, personalized, and acted. So why doesn't Pastor Jacob call them wise?
No, why not?
The resolution is in the ultimate fruit of the action. He contrasts the fraudster with the honest worker who labors to uphold the truth. He concedes they both have the power of practical application for benefit, but he delivers this definitive ruling. At the end, the type of wisdom produced are not the same.
The type of wisdom produced are not the same.
The fraudster has achieved a corrupted worldly wisdom, a weaponized craftiness, but they are entirely devoid of divine wisdom.
Because divine wisdom requires the foundational knowledge to be pure and clean.
Yes, it's aimed at true, positive outward transformation, the prospering of the soul, not the parasitic dispossession of others.
Which proves that not all applied knowledge is equal. The intent, the purity of the raw material matters just as much as the action.
Going back to the baking analogy.
Right, if your flour is poisoned, baking it in the oven doesn't purify it.
Exactly, it just produces a poisonous loaf of bread. You took action, the mechanism worked, but the result is destructive.
Poisoned flour baked with action is still poison. Divine wisdom demands pure flour, genuine courage, and action aligned with upholding the truth.
And this opens the door to a massive realization that the text hints at right at the end of the chapter.
He talks about different types of wisdom.
Yes. He writes that recognizing this difference brings us to different types of wisdom. And he teases that there are different levels or stages for the attainment of creative wisdom.
What a phenomenal cliffhanger.
It really is. It suggests that everything we wrestle with today is just the starting line. Once you accept that true wisdom is pure knowledge practically applied, you step into a whole new paradigm with varying, escalating heights of creative wisdom left to achieve.
Wow. This has been a deeply convicting, paradigm-shifting framework today.
It really has.
We started by stripping away the counterfeits. realizing that the raw skill of craftiness, while culturally rewarded, is just a morally neutral tool.
We explored the trap of knowledge, discovering that hoarding data is just accumulating dormant potential, dry flour in a bowl.
We crossed the bridge of understanding, seeing that abstract thought and empathy, if not physically acted upon, remain paralyzed in the mental realm.
And we arrived at Pastor Jacob's central truth. True divine wisdom requires knowledge and understanding, combined with the painful courage to face yourself in actuality.
The willingness to jolt yourself out of crystallized habits and translate pure knowledge into obedient, practical, transformative action. The wise man hears the sayings and does them.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a challenge based on that final hint about creative wisdom. I challenge you to look at your own life this week. Look at the flour in your mental pantry.
We all have hoarded data.
Think about the books you've read, the sermons you've heard, the brilliant advice you deeply understand but have entirely failed to act upon. What old crystallized habits are you too afraid to face in the mirror?
Because the real tragedy of the human experience isn't a lack of knowledge. The real tragedy is starvation in a kitchen full of flour. What level of creative wisdom could you attain in your family, your career, or your inner life if you finally found the courage to bake the bread?
Remember, the measuring stick of your success isn't what you know, it's what you do with what you know.
Keep seeking the truth, but more importantly, keep doing it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.